Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel, great YouTube, and welcome to another album of the week. This is episode number 145, and today's episode is well dedicated to, of course, the debut self-titled album from Blue Öyster Cult, which was originally released on January 16th of 1972, and since we are at least way past January 16th, this album has already reached its 50th anniversary, so congratulations to, of course, the 50th anniversary for the album that would, of course, would forever just lead the band into being who they are today. It really kick-started their career, and they've had at least a very great career since then, with major albums, major hits, and overall. But this is the album that started it all for them, basically. This was the album that finally got the band off their feet in terms of just the overall footing on the ground. So it's definitely pays some respect to their very first album. So without further ado, let me just get into the overall album and just a little bit of a brief history about Blue Öyster Cult. Since, of course, the reason for why this album even became at least a dream for the band was mostly because of previously they started off as the soft white underbelly. Occasionally they would use this name in the 70s and 80s to play small clubs and gigs around the United States and into, of course, in the UK. But when they first, I guess, were signed by Columbia, and they had, I guess, recorded maybe some demos or even a full record, who knows, in like 1969, and some of those songs eventually were made as bonus tracks on, of course, the reissues and the remasters for the first album here. Apparently Columbia were not satisfied with those recordings that they recorded under the name The Soft White Underbelly. I believe that was the name they were going with. However, eventually when they got, let's just say that when they got dropped by Columbia, they re-recorded at least 2 of the songs, which I believe were Donovan's Monkey and maybe A Fact About Sneakers, or it could have been What Is Quicksand. I can't remember. One of those 2 songs, they picked one of those 2, and or at least any of those 3, and re-recorded those 2, and they were when they got signed with Elektra. This is kind of jumbled here, but this is all the information I can remember from reading inside the booklet for, of course, the remaster for the first Blue Öyster Cult album. They changed their name for a bit there to, of course, the Stock Force Group. Well, I guess, I don't know what happened, but apparently Elektra shelved that 7-inch because they already had pressed, I think, copies of that single that they recorded under the Stock Force Group, and they had shelved it for years. Even their actual recordings, I think, because I think they had recorded more under that name, which eventually got released as the St. Cecilia the Elektra recordings in 2001 through, of course, Rhino Handmade Records, which was one of Rhino's sub-labels. They're basically just, again, really focused on really sort of really rare and obscure releases from some of the most popular bands, Blue Öyster Cult being one of them, of course. And it got shelved. Eventually, they went and, I guess, went back to knocking on Columbia's door. And eventually, I guess, what they had under the name Blue Öyster Cult, because I guess they must have changed it for the new Columbia deal here in 1971. They obviously decided to take one more chance on Blue Öyster Cult. And eventually, what took place at the Waterhouse in New York City with, of course, the producers Murray Krugman, Sandy Pearlman, and David Lucas, and at least from 1971 to 72, ended up becoming the definitive, because of eventually, again, Columbia took the songs, pressed it on record, and that's what everyone got on January 16th, was, of course, the very first album by Blue Öyster Cult, finally they got their dream record that they've been pushing for at least several years, at least a few years there, since 1969. So this is what ended up becoming a dream come true for Blue Öyster Cult. And so here we are with, of course, their very first album. And let's just look at the songs for this album here. As since we got, 10 songs for this album, it all clocked in at the length of 36 minutes and 48 seconds. And let's just look at the songs here. And I'll get into even some information, everything, or backstories around some of these songs here. For example, Transmaniacon, MC. I hope I pronounced that all correctly. I'm on the lamb, but I ain't no sheep. Then came the last days of May, Stairway to the Stars, Before the Kiss, A Red Cap, Screams, She's a beauty. Actually, She's as Beautiful as a Foot. Cities on Flame with Rock and Roll, Workshop of the Telescopes, and then finally ending with Redeemed. So there's your 10 songs for here. And as far as the songs, there are at least some songs are handled by, for the most part, either by Eric Bloom or Buck Dharma, best known again, aka Donald Rosier, his real name. They definitely do add the majority of some of the vocals, some of these songs, but at least Joe Bouchard adds some vocals. That's, of course, is to the song Screams. And Albert Bouchard, of course, handles the vocal duties on the most popular song off of this album, that would being Cities on Flame with Rock and Roll. But for the songs that at least that are handled by Eric Bloom, that, of course, is Maniacon. Maniacon, for some reason, is what it's titled there. That's been, of course, Eric Bloom. Again, he handles, of course, I'm on the lamb, but I ain't no sheep. Stairway to the Stars. She's as Beautiful as a Foot. Workshop of the Telescopes, and of course Redeemed. All those songs are handled by Eric Bloom, whereas songs such as, again, Then Came the Last Days of May, Before the Kiss, A Red Cap, I guess those are the only two there that Buck Dharma only handles vocals to. But for the most part, Eric Bloom seems to really handling a lot of the vocals on the album. So there we go. As far as some information around some of this album, as far as some of the songs and the themes, because before I really get into really any of the overall thoughts, I mean, it's going to be the last couple of stuff, but I want to really get through a lot of some of the information because of, I think, again, what I found on Wikipedia and what, of course, what has been even put in, like, books and everything. Again, I'm going to go straight to, of course, Scott Waters' site, which is No Life Till Metal, because he brings us information even about the song Cities on Flame with Rock and Roll. So let me go to there real quick. But I really want to go through a lot of these just overall song informations and everything, because of really, I think if it really, for this video, to take some time to even just celebrate it, really take some time and look into, like, just delve into some of the history and everything, the overall, just the selective information that I can find, at least on some of the songs, that would be more interesting for this video than just a straight up me telling you what I absolutely think about the album, which eventually I will. But for right now, I'm just focusing on this stuff. So, again, make things different. Instead of, trying to say, really stick to, of course, to the same formula. Because I think that usually can be a problem with a lot of some of these episodes, especially when I do these, is that shit can be formulatic if you're that really familiar with what you're going to do. So it's always very interesting to really kind of change up some of that, the formula a bit, and really kind of do something really interesting, especially for when it comes to a band like Blue Öyster Cult, who has the overall history and everything just leading up to them is just so, it's very rich, very deep. And but the stuff on this album is very interesting. I think it's definitely worth talking about. So here we go. I got it. All right. So let me begin with, of course, with the opening song, Transmaniacon MC, which is a fine rocker, very cool nonetheless. This song, of course, is actually about the Altamont Free Concert, which, again, the MC apparently in the title actually stands for Motorcycle Club. Again, it's just a little brief history about the Altamont Free Concert. Is that, according to here, was a counterculture rock concert in the United States held on Saturday, December 6th, 1969 at the Altamont Speedway in Northern California, which is actually Livermore. Approximately 300,000 attended the concert, and some anticipated that it would be a Woodstock Fest. The Woodstock Festival was actually held in Bethel, New York in mid-August, fewer than 4 months earlier. So obviously this was, I guess that's why many people thought the Altamont Free Concert was going to be, I guess, another Woodstock. And I guess in some ways did, but it was interesting. The events is remembered for the considerable violence, including the stabbing death of Meredith Hunter and 3 accidental deaths, 2 accused by a hit-and-run car accident and 1 by LSD, and 2 drowning in an irrigation canal. Scores were injured, numerous cars were stolen and then abandoned, and then there was extensive property damage. The concert, of course, featured in order of appearance, and we're looking on the Wikipedia page here. Fuck you, Hannibal. Everyone else can use this shit. I mean, at least the people that complain about that fucking asshole. Anyways, the bands that were on this bill were Santana, Jefferson Airplane, the Flying Burrito Brothers, and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, with, of course, the Rolling Stones, taking the stage as the final act. The Grateful Dead were scheduled to perform following the CSNY, but I guess declined to play shortly before their scheduled appearance due to the increasing violence at the venue, because the Grateful Dead are all about peace. They don't want to be a part of something that's absolutely havoc and carnage. That's the way things were at the Altamont, so badly that the Grateful Dead prime organizers and movers of the festival didn't even get to play. There, that's the staff at Rolling Stone magazine. All right, you pretty much get the whole idea. But that's what Öyster Cult at least took inspirations of for the song here. Again, Motorcycle Club, because I think a lot of bikers must have really attended that overall concert. It's really interesting. Let me see if there's anything else about this. I think that's pretty much it. There we go. Then came the last days of May. This one's interesting. This one is actually, according to Wikipedia, and I guess it's already even been stated by Buck Dharma, again, Donald Rosier, is based on a reportedly true story. Actually, obviously, it is a true story. When 2 friends of Dharma's were killed in a drug deal gone bad in the West. Here we go. It was still a soft white underbelly days when, according to Buck here, we were playing dances at the Stony Brook University on Long Island for our subsistence money. 3-story book students went to Tucson, Arizona to buy some bulk marijuana for resale. I don't know how they got whatever contact they had, but it was 2 brothers, Sheons, whatever the fuck, from one of the better-to-do families in Tucson. They never intended to sell them any pot. They just wanted to rip them off and shoot them, which they did. They took them out to the desert and shot them. It was 3 days, and one managed to survive and get back to the highway. I wrote the story from basically the newspaper accounts of the Long Island newspaper Newsday. There's a personal connection to. I knew one of the guys casually from Stony Brook University when we were hanging out there. Again, the song is frequently played as a showcase for Buck Dharma's guitar soloing skills. But there you go. That's some of the more really brief sort of story just behind the writing and the inspiration for the song. Then came the last days of May. So really interesting. And of course, quite crazy too. And obviously, there's some sentimental value to it. And it's kind of a ballad too for the album, but you can kind of tell why it's a ballad, because it has some meaning to, of course, Donald Rosier as a just over on a personal level. So it's really interesting. Very cool. And of course, it's a fine track, too. There's some information here about Before the Kiss a Red Cap, originally titled Connery's Bar. Before the Kiss a Red Cap describes scenes from the real location. Guitarist Donald Rosier explains the title as originating in an event witnessed by lyricist / manager Sandy Pearlman, in which the titular drug was passed between partners during a kiss. The term red cap was supposedly slang for a type of a barbiturate? What the fuck is this? History, folks. Actually, just real history. What the fuck is it? A barbiturate is a drug that acts as a central nervous system depressant. Barbiturates are effective as antibiotics, hypnotics, and anticonvulsants. I think that's what it is. Anticonvulsants? But have physical and physiological addiction potential, as well as overdose potential, among other possible adverse effects. I'm just going to kind of stop there a bit. But that's what the song is about. Basically about a drug that ended up, that apparently got passed around at, I guess, at parties or whatnot that Sandy Pearlman was a part of and witnessed. Really interesting. And as you can tell, this probably was one of the songs that was written by Sandy Pearlman for the album, actually. Let me see real quick. Yes, it was actually written by Alan Lanier, Murray Krugman, Donna Rosier, and Sandy Pearlman. So there we go. Sandy Pearlman is one of the main writers for this one, but it was obviously inspired by something that he had witnessed. Then finally, let's get into Cities on Flame with Rock and Roll. According to Wikipedia, was written, of course, by Sandy Pearlman, Donna Rosier, and Albert Bouchard, and released as a single. Bouchard performed lead vocals, also sang from his drum kit in concerts. The riff was inspired by Black Sabbath song The Wizard, featured on their own self-titled debut. Really, this is not much information that Wikipedia given out. If anything, the best information for this song comes from, of course, Scott Waters' site No Life Till Metal, where he actually brings up some more, a lot more interesting ones. I think that's worth talking about. Again, according to Albert Bouchard, was originally called Siren Sing-Along, Cities on Flame with Rock and Roll. I guess according to him, the song is actually inspired in part by MC5's Motor City is Burning, and of course King Crimson's 21st Century Schizoid Man. So it might have been, if anything, might have been a response to the MC5 song Motor City is Burning, but at the same time, there might be some similarities to, of course, the King Crimson song 21st Century Schizoid Man. So there we go. That's probably the most interesting I can find about this track here. But finally, Redeemed. The lyrics were written by singer/songwriter Harry Farkas and sold to the band. So Rasta Spare was Farkas' pet Saint Bernard. There you go. So there it is. There's about the information, everything that you can find on some of the songs off of at least the first album. Some are really interesting, and you can tell they do some way tell some really interesting stories for these songs. As far as an album itself, well, to really tell you, well, this may not be Öyster Cult's most finest moment. It is their debut album. You can tell they're very young, and they sound hungry. But at the same time, they have yet to really turn into, of course, to be, to the force that they would be known for, years later. Actually, if anything, the really best sort of feel that you get at Öyster Cult would, of course, eventually, as far as the maturity and the really, the greatness of them really does end up showing its form on the next album, that being, of course, Tyranny and Mutation, and of course in his Secret Treaties. But still, actually the song I'm on the Lamb but I Ain't No Sheep eventually would get reworked as The Red and the Black, but the tempos and everything would be changed up for that song. So it's a little more slower here, but on Tyranny and Mutation it's much more faster because of I think it actually was more of a Canadian traditional kind of track. if anything. But eventually, they just used the riff they had for I'm on the Lamb, but ain't no sheep, but just really, they just sped it up. And it just comes off a lot more frantic and more energetic on Tyranny and Mutation. But this early version is pretty cool to hear. But as far as, again, favorites, again, I really do dig Transmaniacon MC. Stairway to the Stars is a really cool fucking rocker. She's as Beautiful as a Foot is one of those really, again, that is just Öyster Cult's real tongue-in-cheek humor. It was actually written by, of course, Albert Bouchard, Alan Lanier, and Richard Meltzer, who would write plenty of some of the more famous songs from Öyster Cult. I believe one of them might being Don't Fear the Reaper. And of course, you got, of course, Cities on Flame with Rock and Roll, which is one of my absolute favorite songs off the album. It is the fan favorite, anyways, for Öyster Cult whenever they play their shows. And that's, I think, the song they played anyways when I saw them live back in 2010, I believe, or 2011 at the, it was a free concert, actually. It was at the Reno Rib Cook-Off. Very packed crowd. Obviously, it was free, and it was a packed crowd. The whole place was packed. I mean, you barely can move around in that overall entire area. It was just, everyone was there to really eat ribs and also see Öyster Cult. It's really cool. And of course, another really favorite of mine is Workshop with a Telescope. So I really dug this one, and it is one of my other favorite songs off the album. So there we go. Again, most part as far as the musical styles of the album, again, you really do get a little bit of that brief feel of the more classic Öyster Cult style rock and roll, but at the same time, you get a lot of the more really almost experimental stuff. You can tell they're really starting, you can hear the sort of psychedelic stuff that they have been, at least had been crafting since their days as probably the Soft White Underbelly and, of course, the Stock Force group. You can hear a little bit that. That's definitely heard on songs like, for example, Before the Kiss, A Red Cap Screams, She's as Beautiful as a Foot, and of course even a bit of like Workshop of the Telescopes and Redeemed. It's really heard in those songs for sure. Definitely. So that's about it. Again, the bonus tracks for the 2001 CD remasters and everything were, of course, were recorded when they must have been under the name Soft White Underbelly. And again, the first songs being, again, Donovan's Monkey, What is Quicksand, A Fact About Sneakers, and of course, a cover of Bobby Freeman's Betty Lou's Got a New Pair of Shoes. And these songs were, of course, recorded at the CBS Studios in New York City on at least from July to September of 1969. And these were, of course, the 4 songs that Columbia Records basically rejected that's why they had to change their name to the Stock Force Group and sign with Elektra, and then that somehow didn't go through, and that's when they went back to knocking on Columbia's door and then changed their name to Öyster Cult and recorded their first album. So there we go. The history and everything all has a way of segueing into each other. There we go. Again, it's a very solid album from beginning to end. It's not their greatest moment, but it's really one of the most fascinating and interesting moments in the band, and it really shows you a very young group that wants to really conquer the world, and eventually you start to hear more of that kind of band on the next 2 albums, being, of course, Tyranny and Mutation and Secret Treaties, and of course going into what are considered to be the Stone Cold classics, for example, like Agents of Fortune and Spectres. So there we go. With, of course, the bigger hits, like, again, This Ain't No Summer of Love, This Ain't the Summer of Love, and Don't Fear the Reaper and Godzilla and those songs, yada, yada, yada. There we go. That's it. Again, 50 years old, the album has turned. It turned 50 years old on January 16th of 2022, and if you were there when this album first came out, again, if you got any, again, the nostalgic memories and everything, whether they be positive or negative nostalgic memories, again, you can post them in the comment section below. But if you ended up hearing this album much years later and you're somewhat either fond of the album or you're not as much fond of the album, again, leave those in the comment section below. But if you've never heard the debut album from Öyster Cult, it is definitely worth a listen just because it's a really good insight into what they were earlier. And the sort of transition from the earlier sound they were, really developing as, like, of course, the Soft White Underbelly, or, of course, the Stock Force group, and, of course, then transitioning into the more the more core Blue Öyster Cult sound that you would get with, of course, Tyranny Mutation and Secret Treaties, and so on, that would then, of course, transition into the more commercial rock sound of course, Agents of Fortune and Spectres and whatnot. So there we go. Again, it's very much worth a listen for those reasons only. So there we go. That's it. I hope all of you enjoyed. This is Heavy Thrash saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.